Thank you for joining us here today, and we are, of course, here to talk about our best performing cities, which it's an annual publication that we have at the Milken Institute, where we rank 403 metropolitan areas in the United States. And this year we have, of course, Raleigh and Ogden Clearfield as our top metropolitan areas, number 1 and 2 respectively in the United States. And so just to tell you a little bit about this ranking, we take into account, of course, labor market conditions, but we balance those out with other aspects of economic growth, such as the access to economic opportunities across these different cities. And so we really try to balance the ranking overall in order to be able to provide an overall perspective of the well-being of the communities and the vigorousness of the labor market. So what we have, so today with us, we are lucky to have Mayor Janet Cowell joining us from Raleigh, and Mayor Ben Nadolski joining us from Ogden, that, as I mentioned, are the number 1 and 2 best performing large cities in our ranking. And so without further ado, I'll jump right into the conversation today. So the reason why you are here with me today is because your labor markets have been performing wonderfully over the past several years. So the first question I would have would be for you, Mayor Cowell. What do you think are really the main
are a huge driver of talent, both creating our own and attracting outside talent. And we've had a very diversified mix of industries. Fortunate to have tech, life science, sort of emergent things like clean tech, and but also have medical and of course education. So just feel for, and then we've been able to retain many of these college graduates through, I think, just very a lot of forethought in investing in things like even back in the 70s. Raleigh created one of the first greenway networks in the United States. We have over 200 miles of greenway across the city, lots of parks. We've invested in, we have the Hurricanes, professional hockey, large parks. So things that keep people sort of in the area, in addition to the cost of living and just the talent.
And these are all topics that we are going to touch upon in our conversation today. Definitely the importance of open spaces for the community development and such. But turning the question to you, Mayor Nadolski, I know in Utah there's several cities that have been performing well, with Ogden really leading the pack this year. So what's the secret sauce that makes cities like Ogden thrive?
No, I love the question because Utah does have a secret sauce, and it's not just the fry sauce that we're also famous for, but we have a cultural significance that's important, and it really starts with how our state was founded, and it was founded through our predominant faith and a mission moving westward, all in a collective belief in faith. And as those pioneers settled Utah, they had a difficult journey of persecution. And what they brought with them was this sense and spirit of collaboration, togetherness, and oneness. This need, not just for thriving, but for survival, to work together and to make sure that everybody's lifting in the same direction. And that's really significant for the secret sauce of Utah because it absolutely transcends generations, and it is now cultural. And so everything that we do in Utah, we call the Utah way, is this sense of togetherness, a spirit of thriving together, and that investing in ourselves to ensure that we succeed individually, but while we rise, we all have an obligation to make sure that those around us rise. And so when you take that cultural element and apply it to the context of our metropolitan statistical area, Ogden City is the heart and the hub as the big city of the area, but it incorporates all those other cities and counties, and that same spirit of everyone rising and lifting together is what brings us to the number 2 ranking.
Yes. So you touch upon the point of this collaborative spirit, and as you mentioned, Ogden Clearfield Metropolitan Statistical Area is a collection of multiple cities. So, and you touched upon this, but how do you think that contributes to the success of Ogden? How do you work with the other cities? What is this collaborative spirit? How do you put it into practice?
So the important thing is that, and again, this is another really significant part about living and working and leading in Utah, is that we all carry a spirit of abundance. There's not a spirit of scarcity. It's not a spirit of me against you or us against them. It is a spirit of we can all thrive and win and proceed and progress. And so as I work with my neighboring mayors and county commissioners and local legislators and the governor and even our congressional delegation especially, we all share that spirit of abundance. And so we're not in competition with each other. We're literally in this together. And that is the thing that makes an MSA like the Ogden Clearfield area rise.
Yes, and the same question to you, Mayor Cowell. So the metropolitan area of Raleigh is also a large metropolitan statistical area that includes cities in several counties across Wake, Johnston, and Franklin County.
Yep.
So what are the type of synergies that really you work on with the other cities to make Raleigh succeed and the other cities?
Yeah, well, and I appreciate your answer about the sort of faith-based sort of culture. I would say, you know, in Raleigh and North Carolina, I found a very welcoming culture that may not be, you know, based purely out of a common faith, but I think going back to the universities, when you've got a lot of people coming into an area, right, and a lot more sort of in-migration, it has been a very welcoming place and a collaborative place. I remember the very first, I'm originally from Tennessee, and I moved to Raleigh in the late 90s, and I had to shift my license plate, and I was out in the parking lot with the wrong screwdriver trying to get this thing off, and a guy stopped and said, I can help you. And I thought, well, what a friendly place this is. So I think, yes. Those sense of welcoming and being able to take that sort of, you know, that talent pool and make it feel not just like a big collection of individuals, but a community, and being able to welcome them.
Yes, no, and speaking of the talent pool, and you mentioned this already, but one of the things that really stands out looking at the Raleigh Metropolitan Statistical Area is the industrial diversity of businesses in your area. So what are the characteristics of Raleigh that you think have allowed you to develop this mix of different industries?
Yeah, well, again, just sort of having a broad set of different universities. NC State, I love NC State. It's a land-grant university founded in the 1860s, 70s, and it has so many different specialties.
Yes.
Forestry, landscape architecture, you know, architecture, textiles, agriculture. It's just such and it's all like quant-based, right? It's the biggest, fourth largest engineering school, you know, in the country. But it just spins off a lot of, you know, different aspects. And then, of course, you combine that with Duke, with the medical schools and UNC, the liberal arts, and, you know, just environmental programs there. You just get a really rich mix of disciplines and people that have, you know, allowed us to have this very diversified economy.
Yes, no, and it's very interesting because some of the cities that have grown in the past have really been very strongly based on the high-tech sector. And I know the technology industry is definitely also a component of Raleigh's success. So how do you see the technology industry playing into that?
Yeah, and I think that will continue to be a strong aspect. There are new programs, you know, in AI and quantum and lots of other programs. The engineering school at NC State will be expanding. They're going to have another 4,000 students. So right now it's 35,000 people campus. It'll go up to 40,000, and that is right near downtown. So it is a very centralized university. And I think, you know, life sciences, we'll see where this whole, you know, of course we have multiple counties. We do have a lot of land in North Carolina, so we've
Yes.
seen some of the data centers coming
Yes.
in,
Yes.
and investment in sort of lighter manufacturing. So I think we've got a lot of diversity in the region, unlike some other areas that may be more just constrained or built out.
Yes, no, and in contrast to Raleigh, in a way, the metropolitan area of Ogden Clearfield really has one very strong sector, which is the defense sector that has made the city thrive. So, Mayor Nadolski, how does Ogden really leverage the defense-centric businesses that it has developed in order to promote growth in the city?
Perfect. So defense and aerospace sector is it's critical not just for our local economy, it's critical for our nation's defense, it's critical for world peace, especially the role that Hill Air Force Base plays right in our backyard. And it's in the backyard of, again, multiple cities. And we've leveraged that not just to our advantage, but as a partner. So anytime you talk about national defense and a defense mission, you have to be talking about support from neighboring communities. And every time we go on base and have events and have our coordination, the military leadership is always talking about how incredible the local support is around the base. Because the mission is served certainly and led on base, but you have to have this ecosystem that surrounds it of private industry that's driven by private people that are innovative and creative and collaborative. And so that's really where we've tapped into the industry, is using our social capital, our social infrastructure, which is, people often have a focus only on the physical infrastructure, but for me it's really the social infrastructure, the energy that the people bring to the table that drives the development of the physical infrastructure, and it's a feedback both directions. And so when we talk about how have we leveraged the opportunity, it's about leveraging opportunity for our people. Putting our people in a position to tap into the opportunity, to level up in their lives, and to achieve individual success. And then again, going back to the culture around Utah and the secret sauce, as we individually are investing in ourselves, we're investing in the success of others around us. And that is such a intoxicating feeling, to have that feeling within yourself and to see and to feel it from others around you. And it catalyzes into an energy that supports the mission for the nation, and it supports the needs of our community. And that, in an essence, is a collaborative partnership.
And so, speaking about supporting the multiple needs of your community, how do you see the importance of non-defense manufacturing, other types of sectors coming up for the long-term growth of Ogden Clearfield?
Sure. So if you talk about aerospace and defense, you might have a mindset that that is a single industry and that we're not diversified, but really why it's there and what it also creates are industries that are around it, especially around advanced manufacturing. So certainly we need engineers, they need project leaders for defense sector, but they also need advanced, highly skilled, highly trained and certified advanced manufacturing. Well, so do outdoor products. If you're building all of those things, if you're looking at advanced materials like carbon fiber, well, those same materials apply to ski poles and skis, and for snow and for water skis, and all of the different bicycle components and stuff that you're trying to eliminate weight. And so as a community, we're also leveraging those opportunities because we are an attractive place to live. Again, getting back to the faith cultures that started, we're a very faith diverse community now, but those fundamentals make a great place to live and a great place to raise a family, because we have access to opportunities economically, access to outdoor recreation that's world class. That's why we're going to have the Olympics. We are an absolute mix of all of the highlights that people are looking for to have a phenomenal quality of life.
Yes, and we'll definitely talk more about quality of life and the access to economic opportunities in just a moment. But Mayor Cowell, going back to you and the talent in Raleigh, one thing that we have seen is that Raleigh has really worked hard to build a vibrant ecosystem for its entrepreneurs, and has been reflected in the numbers. The startup rate in Raleigh is higher than in the nation as a whole. So what are the main initiatives that you see that you plan on developing, or that Raleigh has developed in the past years to support its entrepreneurs and startups?
Yep, we have a two-prong approach. So the City of Raleigh works through our chamber on the bigger recruitments. And so that can be everything from professional services firms who locate in Raleigh, because of course we're a state capital, so you've got all sorts of law firms and accountants and those kind of folks, to we also defense industry. We are near an hour away from Fort Liberty, so also have a lot of synergies with one of the largest veteran communities in the United States, and all this. So we work with the chamber on recruitment and the state. Then at a more local level at the city, we do a lot around small business development, particularly minority, or underserved development. I was at a Native American sort of gala recently, and it's interesting. You just talk about we have one of the largest Native American populations east of the Mississippi in North Carolina. We have about 7 tribes statewide. Most people think about the Cherokee, but we have more. And they were talking about how there's a lot more urban Native Americans now because they've looked for opportunity in these high-growth cities like Raleigh. And we had I ran into the City of Raleigh outreach coordinator who was at this Native American event. There was a caterer, right, who was specializing. It was a Native American, kind of charcuterie board. It was it was very good. So just working with folks like that entrepreneur who was trying to translate her, Native American foodways into a business. So there's a lot of effort around Hispanic and business startup. How do we work with people to get past the barriers of permitting? And then we have a dynamic sort of first generation. I studied Chinese and lived in Asia, so I've always had a good relationship with the Chinese community. And some of my best friends have just started up. We have a nice logistics. The location of Raleigh being central. So one of my really good friends has started e-commerce. She's a native Mandarin speaker, and there's all these hyper overqualified Chinese people around, with labeling and drop shipping, and her garage is full of returns. But she's already gotten $2 million in startup funding, and so just interesting to see all these different facets that emerge out of a very diverse set of people looking to do all sorts of different businesses.
So yes, and to the point of kind of community well-being and promoting the people of different backgrounds. So you find yourselves today in a spotlight, right? Your cities are really the top cities in best performing city rankings, and so there's a lot of attention on the growth in your area. So how do you think you can capitalize that to promote broad economic growth, but also well-being of the residents of your cities? And we can start with Mayor Cowell.
Well, I mean, continuing to get attract investment. I will say the one thing Raleigh always has felt a little sensitive about is we don't have a lot of Fortune 500 firms. We have Martin Marietta Materials. They do composite. They've been very generous in the community. We have First Citizens Bank that acquired Silicon Valley Bank and catapulted up the numbers. So we do have some Fortune 500, but we don't have as many headquarters as some communities might. So hopefully things like this, right, trying to build a little more critical mass, and then just attracting other entrepreneurs who want to come in and just build off of. One thing we're also really proud of in Raleigh is the food and beverage entrepreneurship. I was recently working at this very large park, and we're going to start food and beverage in the park, and we had national consultants come in and talk about, wow, you guys have James Beard winners, you've got this incredible startup scene, you've got this incredibly diverse population, so Indian restaurants or Afghan restaurants, or just the richness of that, and attracting those kinds of entrepreneurs who want to come in and provide the services, right, to these larger employers.
And same question to you, Mayor Nadolski. How can you use the spotlight to promote growth in your city?
So when I think about promoting growth, we're talking about different types of growth depending on different parts of our MSA. Ogden's a physically constrained city. We're a legacy city where we are already largely built out, and so a lot of our development is redevelopment. And so a lot of the growth is not necessarily growth in total number of residents, but it's growth in residents within the full MSA. So we've got a lot of other cities and communities around us that have a lot more space for building out. But we need to be making sure that we're taking advantage as the city center because we grow in our population throughout the day. I mean, if we're pushing double our daytime or our nighttime population every single day, that's a lot of services and a lot of people coming in and going out. And so that's a dynamic we have to keep in mind at all times. But again, getting back to the Utah way, well, let's talk about the Ogden way, because all of that ethos and the cultural collaboration absolutely provides a foundation for Ogden, and Ogden is Utah's most diverse city nationally. And so we are 1/3 Hispanic Latino, and that brings with it a lot of different culture and flavor, different events and arts, culinary opportunities downtown. And so we become a really vibrant and eclectic city that national and international people are looking for. And so when they come and look for opportunities to work in the aerospace and defense industry, they're looking for a place either to visit while they're there or a place to live. And so Ogden reflects what international labor is looking for in a place to live. They see people that are like them, they taste different foods, experience different events, different cultural artifacts that they love, and that creates the vibrancy for Ogden that just accelerates all the other benefits.
And that's very interesting to hear because you talk about the diversity in your metropolitan area, and yet Ogden is ranked #1 in terms of income distribution, meaning that it has the most equitable income distribution among large cities in the United States. So how have you been able to maintain that level of income distribution among this diversity?
As an economist, you'll appreciate this because it is a function of a number of different factors fundamentally. But again, getting back to that sense of ethos and spirit of investing in myself and lifting those around me, when you're lifting others around you, you're elevating together. That creates an environment of equity, right, and opportunity. But it's also a function of the cost of living. And oftentimes we're, certainly right now especially, housing costs are significant. And there are some things that we can do as local governments and local leaders to mitigate the impacts of rising housing costs. But what we are trying to focus on and what I am always trying to push and lead out on is being a voice around household costs. Because if we are, that's going to include taxes, it's going to include energy, transportation is a big piece of it, right? Yes. If we start looking at the household costs, and those are areas where collectively we can make a bigger impact, then we can also look at household income. Yes. So the difference between the household cost, the difference between household income, the larger we get that delta or space in between represents discretionary spending, represents opportunities for quality of life. And so that's really our focus, is the cost of housing as a component of overall household costs and household income. And when you focus on things like that, you have a better chance of elevating people's quality of life.
Yes. And Mayor Cowell, turning to you, Raleigh is a city that is almost double the size of Ogden Clearfield. And yet your metropolitan area also performs well in terms of equitable income distribution. So what do you think are the factors that have contributed to your equitable income growth?
I'll say, so I was in politics 20 years ago. So I was on the city council 20 years ago, and now I'm back as mayor now. And Richard Florida was a big name back when I started. And talking about creative class, right, and all these sort of economic drivers. And I returned to Richard Florida's work this past year when I was running for mayor and saw that big cities really have a huge challenge on income and equity. Yes. And it's smaller towns in America and the Midwest and the Central Plains are much more equal. So this irony of you think you can grow out of it, and that's going to create opportunity for everybody, but yet many people struggle, including Raleigh. Yes. And the biggest pushback I got when we were announced as #1 is people saying, yeah, we're #1, but of course growth sometimes is driving people out of the county, out of the city. So, I think we're doing as well as we are, knowing there's still a lot of people that are being displaced because we have tried to diversify housing, allow housing to go forward. The last 2 city councils changed the zoning so that one could do multiplexes, accessory dwelling units. and not be as restrictive on single family. I think that has been helpful. And other investments in transit and alternative means of getting around. So I think certainly the investments, but I think mostly the fact that housing
Yes.
is being built and those units are out there.
So, speaking of housing affordability, there's a topic that comes up over and over again when we talk about metropolitan areas in the United States. And so, Mayor Cowell, you speak about the importance of diversifying housing options. In that effort, in that push to diversify housing options, what are the main obstacles that you have faced in your experience?
Well, lawsuits. Yeah, that's the American way.
Yes.
Talk about the Utah way. The American way is lawsuits. And there are still a lot of folks that challenge it. And I understand, I'm from Tennessee, so I grew up in the South. And most of the homes I lived in growing up were single family homes. I mean, that's what you're used to, the backyard, that you're used to getting out there with a mower. It is a huge mindset shift, especially for like a southern city, to think about, well, maybe a single family home is going to be maybe not affordable, and maybe I'm going to have to live in a townhome, or maybe it's going to be, a duplex or an apartment or a condo. That is a huge psychological mindset shift and destabilizing factor. So I understand that for many people who've lived in a place like Raleigh for 50 years, the amount of change and the fact that you can no longer afford what used to be affordable, so that is a massive challenge, and I would like to get better data and buy-in, trying to explain to people that just building all housing, allows affordable housing to be more prevalent. As opposed, you get a lot of the pushback of, well, you're building this high-end housing, and they think developers are crooks, right? So you just have a lot of difficult political messaging around the economics of the housing market and the complexity of the housing market.
So do you think in that to get more of or rather to counteract the local opposition data, more information would be helpful, or is it?
I felt like when I was running for mayor that I was running in a bit of a black box, like there just wasn't really obvious data. And I know other councilors were trying to push for better dashboards and even just better language around what citizens are talking about. If housing is the number one issue, why don't we just have a committee called housing? And why don't we have, our budget and our metrics on our website reflect all the things we're doing on housing or affordable housing, as opposed to having to dig through the budget and all these different departments who may have, one little finger in the pie. How do we pull this picture together, set targets, and measure against those goals?
Yes, no, and I can definitely see how more transparency can definitely help counteract some of the obstacles that you're facing. Mayor Nadolski, you have also spoken about the importance of balancing both multifamily with single-family housing units. So what is your viewpoint on that topic?
No, that's really important for Ogden in particular. Again, looking at our entire MSA, with Ogden being the city core, but we are a bedroom community too. But us having the vibrant downtown means that that's where a lot of the main engine of economics is for the MSA, and where a lot of the density starts. It's the primary area of density for the whole MSA. So when we talk about housing, we like to think of it as, at least for me, think of it as kind of a cycle. Think of where you're at in your lot in life right now. For me, I came into Ogden, went to school at Weber State University, played football, met my wife. We fell in love with each other and got married shortly after college, looking for our first starter home. That's a certain type of home of affordability and access. That has changed. There's a paradigm shift generationally that is taking place around what that first time home looks like. But then we lived a life, we both developed careers, got further educated, and then we went into a family phase where we had two daughters. They're 13 and 14 now, and since then we moved into a second home, a bigger home, access to a park, etc. Well, those guys are going to go on to college one day, we hope, maybe even play sports, and then it's just going to be my wife and I, and we're going to be looking to downsize. And so there's a cycle. And when we downsize, we hope to have active lifestyles. But then what about when we get older and we want a single level senior living, and then we need supported senior living. So there's just this cycle, right? And fortunate for me and my wife, we didn't have to go through some of the other seasons that other people are going through, like need for permanent supportive housing and transitional housing, and right. And throughout college, we both rented. We need to have access to that. So think of housing as a cycle, and you have to have within that cycle and that spectrum, we've got to provide for a mix of housing types across that spectrum of affordability, because people are coming and going from each of them. It's very dynamic. And so you got to look at the balance of the types of homes you have and how much they cost. And for the MSA particularly, we've got to be looking at that across cities and counties as well. Because each city is providing a little bit of an advantage and an opportunity for the entire MSA to lift. And those development patterns are critical. So when we look at the challenges for building, it's accelerating the supply is our challenge. The challenges around local zoning and ordinances and collaboration at the local level along with the state level, et cetera. And making sure that, so we don't completely look at developers as crooks. We have to be looking at them as partners, because that's the leg that's going to be building us out.
Yes.
So that's the mindset for us, the spectrum of housing type and affordability, and making sure that the entire MSA is doing their part to lift the need for all of the people that are wanting to live and work and play within our city and the neighboring area.
And you mentioned the topic of supply, and as we know in economics, it's always about supply and demand, right? And so the demand that is putting pressure on housing in both of your cities has been the influx of domestic migrants into your cities. So in addition, because of the population growth that your areas have been experiencing, what are some of the other main challenges that we all know about housing affordability? What are the other main challenges that you are facing as your cities are growing from the population growth perspective?
I mean, I'll just say, so we have about 25% African American population, and unfortunately, because of racial discrimination, right, you had concentrated black neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods now have become very highly sought after, and there's been a massive amount of displacement, which creates racial tensions in cities like Raleigh, Charlotte, and others. So I'd say that's one. The unhoused. When I was in city council 20 years ago, I really don't remember a lot of unhoused in Raleigh, and even now it is compared to a lot of West Coast communities that have huge populations of unhoused, we may have between 1,000 and 2,000, but it's more obvious and panhandling, that kind of thing on highways. So that has become a much deeper concern. One of the first things I did as mayor in December, I was sworn in at the beginning of December, was having a meeting with the county manager, because I knew we were having these cold weather events. They were closing some shelters, and what were we going to do to make sure people aren't literally freezing to death outside, and protect human life. So those are just a few of the examples of some of the complexities that come with this rising housing costs.
Yeah, and Ogden has also been experiencing tremendous population growth. So from your perspective, Mayor Nadolski, what are the main challenges that come from that? Are there any infrastructure challenges or others that you're facing?
Absolutely. For Ogden City specifically, again, we're not growing by leaps and bounds by population size in the boundaries of our city proper. In the MSA we are.
Yes.
And in that MSA are a number of different cities that have different growth patterns. Lots of open, undeveloped space, legacy farmlands, et cetera, that are developing into more urbanized settings. So one of the challenges is how much density can you put into those areas without overwhelming the local culture that is transitioning from that rural landscape into the urban landscape. That's one challenge. But another challenge that I hear a lot about, especially for the workforce, it's not just around the cost of housing, but they need access to childcare.
Yes.
So childcare is something that each worker and family has got to have access to, or else you cannot leave the home in order to support the mission of our nation, right? Yeah. So that's another factor that I hear a lot from our defense contractors and partners that we really need to look at. But when we talk about population growth and the dynamic of in-migration, I think it's also important that we focus on how do we focus on the people that we already have, the people that have always lived in Ogden, that have been here looking to access opportunities and level up in their life to earn a better wage and live a better quality of life. And so we can't just focus on bringing people in to fill these jobs that we're recruiting. We've got to have a focus on investing in ourselves, investing in each other to make sure that they are, advanced manufacturing, as an example, is a perfect fit for a huge part of our demographic that's looking for opportunity for better lives. And we can engage them because they're working in manufacturing jobs, hard-working, labor-intensive people with skills with their hands, creative mindsets, the spirit of industriousness. And we can translate that into advanced manufacturing with our partners at the university, at Weber State University, as well as our Applied Technology College. They can give them the certifications they need to transition from a lower-paying, hard-working job into a higher tech, more advanced manufacturing. And that is a changing dynamic for a family, especially in the environment of inflation that we're in. Those are the kinds of things that we need to be focused on besides just bringing workers in.
And it's very interesting that you mentioned actually childcare, because one thing that we find, speaking of investing in the population that is already there, is for the importance of childcare for female labor force participation, which is a topic that is definitely important in multiple cities, again, across the United States and international, broadly speaking. So, and talking about international trends, Mayor Cowell, in addition to attracting a lot of domestic migrants, Raleigh has also attracted a significant proportion of international migrants into the metropolitan area. So what are the ways do you think that the UN and the metropolitan area generally can use in order to make sure that that enriches your community?
Yeah, so we have, in the metropolitan area, towns like Morrisville, 60% Asian. Another town, Apex, is 20% Asian. My friend that I was mentioning earlier, Lisa, who's creating the business, when I go to her neighborhood, everybody in the neighborhood speaking Hindi and Mandarin. They're all running around, and the school that they go to. So it's incredible how different the pockets can be. I mean, in terms of incorporating those, Raleigh itself, while we do have a large Asian population as well, not it's under 10%. I want Raleigh to be a welcoming place where all these communities can gather. We had a Jaipur Literary Festival last year. One of my good friends is Senator Jay Chaudhary, who's in the state Senate, and he's been great at incorporating the Indian community into Raleigh. I just went to a Chinese, of course, Year of the Snake talent show, and I prep my Mandarin capacity and go out there, and that actually the Secretary of State dressed up like a Chinese empress, and with the headdress and everything. Anyway, so just ways of really celebrating these communities, bringing them in both to Raleigh, and making them just a rich part of the community.
Yes, and speaking of making it easier for people to become incorporating new populations into the community, I do want to talk about the importance of open spaces and recreational facilities. And both of you have a background in this. Mayor Cowell, you specifically, before you were mayor of Raleigh, you were the CEO of the Dix Park Conservancy.
Yep.
So what did that teach you about the importance of open spaces and parks and recreational areas for the well-being of communities, generally speaking? Yeah,
so if any of y'all do get the chance to come to Raleigh, which I hope you do, Dix Park is this incredible piece of land right next to downtown, and it's special. Partially, it was a mental health hospital, but it was built on a hill overlooking the city in the 19th century, when the idea about mental health, was that you needed fresh air and sunlight and a beautiful view, and this would make you feel better, which of course still holds true. And just to see that as a gathering space and what it has done for the community, and I'll give you a couple examples. J. Cowell, who is a hip hop artist who hails from Fayetteville, North Carolina, decided to do a Dreamville festival, hip hop. I mean, we had Nicki Minaj. I get to see the green room. You get to hear all the backstories. But 55,000 people a day for 2 days in this massive field in Dix Park, and it is an incredible event that really brings and I will say, in the 5 years they've had this thing, there's only been like 3 arrests. Now, there's a lot of pot smoke, I will say, but all calm, all good, all very friendly. That's just an example of the types of things that are possible when you have that sort of space to bring people together. Another thing, the public art and the programs. We plant sunflowers every year, and I'm amazed. Speaking of the South Asian community, you just go out there and you hear so many different languages of people who come out and they're all wandering amongst these sunflowers. And somebody was saying, if you're going on a date on the local hookup app, dating apps, everybody's got a picture in front of the sunflowers. Like that's the shot, right, that everybody posts on their dating app. So it's just nice to see how it's incorporated itself into the community.
Yes, and so given the importance of the spaces, when we talk about the ways to raise money for that, what do you think is the importance of public-private partnerships and making sure that there's funding for these open spaces?
We have a neighboring city, Cary, that has also built an incredible park downtown that has really rejuvenated that area, and they did it all through public money. Which I resented that because I was out there hoofing it. We raised $40 million in the last 3 years from a lot of generous, mostly families, but also corporations. The things that are possible through public-private, and I get to see, like even on the food and beverage, which I mentioned earlier, the city is not particularly talented or good at providing food experiences in public parks. So to be able to have a third-party conservancy go out there, we were able to get all the best restaurateurs, entrepreneurs, everybody wanted to help, do a RFP. Now, I will say none of this it's all going into motion this spring, but I feel really good about the decisions we've made and the flexibility that the Conservancy Partnership, we renovated 3 old buildings. We got them knocked out in 18 months. I mean, the city would have still been going to bid. So finding ways that you can get work done more flexibly, and how do you pair the best of both worlds, the stability and the insurance of the city with a more nimble nonprofit and the innovation of private sector people.
Yes. And Mayor Nadolski, you bring over 2 decades of experience at the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. So I'm sure in your experience you also have a lot of opinions about the importance of open spaces. So what is your view and how you can incorporate that into the future of Ogden? So
before being mayor, I was involved and had the blessing and the fortune to protect tens of thousands of acres of open space, landscape scale, watershed scale properties for the benefit of wildlife primarily. And if any of you have not been to Ogden, Utah, I challenge you, in the crowd, anybody watching online, pull out your phone and Google Ogden, Utah. Go to Google Images, and what you'll see is a city with a enormous mountain range. Immediately in our front yard and in our backyard, it's completely in our lives. It is so immediately adjacent. And the significance of that is not only the natural beauty, but the accessibility of it. And so we have what we call a mountain to metro lifestyle. And that's largely why we have a high quality of life. So when I think about access to open space and recreation and parks, amenities, et cetera, that mountain in our backyard and in our front yard is an enormous driving force. But you've got to think about the human spirit. Think about thriving as a human being. What are the things that you need access to? And those are the things that I call the pillars of opportunity and pillars of success. And for some people who are not secure in their lives, they need access to food. They need access to a meal. They need access to a shelter, right? But some people are a little further along on that scale, and that's why we need to be talking about everybody and access to opportunity, having a safe place with safe streets, access to infrastructure, access to stable and safe neighborhoods, access to education, right? But if you really want to get to a place where you're not just surviving, but you're thriving, you want to have access to whether it's access to your faith beliefs, or even just your spiritual belief, there's something that happens within us when we access the outdoors. And we do it when we're being active. And being healthy, being active, and being spiritually connected to something bigger than ourselves, that's where you really start to tap into the human spirit, and you don't just survive. You don't just live, you start to thrive. And so if we really want to tap into the social capital that I talked about, tapping into the human spirit, you've got to have access to places like that. And for us, that access is literally out our door. I mean, my front yard is mountains. If you live in the downtown environment, you're minutes away from those same mountains, minutes. So that's why we have a great quality of life, but it's also why we're going to be hosting the 2034 Olympics. That is an international, as big a stage as it gets. It's not our first time, but it's because of those amenities. It's also because of our people.
And so we are nearing the end of this conversation, but because of the importance of the people, because of the importance of social capital, I do want to touch on the topic of education. And of course, in the case of Raleigh, as you mentioned multiple times, you are right there. Your proximity to the Research Triangle and to the 3 universities in the area has been clue to your success. But in addition to that, you also have technical and training programs in Raleigh that people may be less familiar with than the great universities that you have in the area. So what has been the importance of those type of programs for the success of your community?
Yeah, I was talking to our local economic developer recently, and he said, everybody thinks about the Duke and the NC States, but when they get here, they end up working with Wake Tech. On the practical matters. And Wake Tech we have an incredible community college system in North Carolina as well as the 4-year university system. And Wake Tech has 70,000 students. And they have satellite campuses across the county. They're opening a new one near Wake Med Hospital that's going to be a training facility for nurses, med techs. We have another one that opened. Some of these are public-private partnerships on auto mechanics, the whole automotive industry. And then you've got things like, plumbing, electrical, surveyors. So just incredibly, good technical training. And for the jobs that are in the most demand without enough supply, you can apply for those top 10 categories and go for free. So I'm just really proud that we have, this whole spectrum of educational opportunities in our county, and I sat on the community college board for years, so proud to tout it.
Yeah. Now, and Mayor Nadolski, in your case, Ogden, the city of or the metropolitan area of Ogden-Clearfield has one of the biggest young populations. So, how do you think you can now invest in resources to make sure that young population acquires the skills that they will need to thrive in life?
Sure. So it's not just about acquiring the skills, it's also about having access to the opportunities.
Yes.
And not everybody wants to work in the aerospace and defense industry. And so we've got to have different areas that people can work in. And one of the biggest industries that provides for a really diverse economy, especially in our downtown, is tourism. And tourism is absolutely a reflection of our open space and our surroundings, right? And so as we look to the younger generation, we do have that advantage. And what comes with youth also brings energy, right? Young people are more energetic than the rest of us that are older, right? Not me, I'm getting more energetic by the day. But they bring that energy that drives our economy. And so how do we equip them for the skills to enter the workforce, whether it's in tourism, whether it's in retail, which is a huge benefit of tourism, right? As we bring in outside people, we're bringing outside money, right? And we align tourism with in our community needs. Now we're providing for access to education and opportunities funded by people that don't live there in order to support the livelihood and the elevation within our lives of the people that do live there. So when we look to education and look to the youth, we need to make sure that we've got a school district that's on board with preparing our workforce. Not everybody is prepared or wants to enter higher education, right? But they might want a different pathway through high-tech certifications. We have such a dynamic and collaborative school district who is led by a superintendent. It's one of my former teammates at Weber State on the football team. That's the kind of city we are. We've got 2 Weber State Wildcats leading the 2 biggest anchor institutions, and they're providing OTech high school, meaning while you're going to high school, having the traditional experience, you can go to the OTech high and learn all the high skill trades, right? And you can still prepare for higher education and get credits for it, or you can stay in the traditional route and have access to higher education. The key is having all of it, because those are the skills and the traits that we need to go into the diverse workforce, right? But you also have to have access to adult education, workforce training after, right, when you're later in life, because people are trying to transition into a new life. And so we can't do any of these things as a city in Ogden without having partners like President Mortensen at Weber State University and Superintendent Rasmussen at the Ogden School District, right? We've got to have the Tech College with President Taggart. Those are friends and neighbors, people we run into downtown. That's the kind of community and the dynamic you have to have, because we're not after building a city, we're after building a community. And when you build a community, you build an energy and an inertia, and it just snowballs and it drives, and it creates opportunities like we're gonna have, where in 2034, we host the Olympics, and we don't build the things for the Olympics is building everything for us.
Are you going to have free tickets?
Negative. I hope I get a ticket.
Yeah.
No. It's the energy around the events though, right? And we have an opportunity in Ogden and in Utah to welcome the world, introduce them to the Utah way, come to Ogden, learn the Ogden way, live it and feel it. And you'll understand when you feel the energy, what we are feeling. And then you're gonna wanna invest there. And when you wanna invest there, you invest in yourself. When you invest in yourself, you invest in those around you. When you do that, you lift everyone. And that's what makes us one of the most egalitarian cities in the country, the most egalitarian city or state in the nation. And that's why Utah continues to lead economically, continues to lead in every way possible, with Utah at the front and center, thanks to the Milken Institute.
Well, we are all very excited about 2034 and the Olympics. We are also very excited. We are also at the beginning of 2025 right now, in January. So just to close off this conversation, let me ask you both, what are some of the main things that are exciting you for this year that is upcoming in your administration? And so,
You go ahead. Yes.
Okay, so I'm just starting my second year in my administration. Prior to that, I spent 8 years on the city council. So I've been involved for a long time. And before that, I was a volunteer, a community member, involved in a number of different things. But I like to say that in my first year, we really set a tone, right? And when we set a tone, we set a standard. So in the coming year, I'm really looking forward to setting the table, meaning we're gonna set a table for not just the city to be driving economic input and output, but other community anchors and partners, which we're all lifting together. But now let's lift with a really critical focus and an intensity in key places that don't just drive the measures and the metrics that the Milken Institute measures, but the metrics that drive our lives, right? So in the coming year, we're gonna set the table. And when we set that table, I'm telling you, we are going to set records. That's the inertia and the energy I feel right now. I hope you guys feel it. And if you don't feel it, come to Ogden, Utah, and I guarantee you'll feel it.
Yeah, well, of course, I just got off a campaign, and so housing, right? Looking forward to just advancing projects, figuring out what the stumbling blocks are, how can we get more on the ground, in the intermediate, the unhoused, working to be a caring and innovative community when it comes to those sorts of issues. Public safety, I got a new police chief I got to hire, and also heard a lot about alternative response units. How can we work with folks that aren't criminals but are having mental health or drug addiction or other issues that are really more about psychiatry or social work, and creating, right, a space maybe outside the police department for that. So some big issues and a lot of collaboration, but again, we have a great community in Raleigh, and I appreciate you recognizing that. And yes, look forward to continuing to make the tops of your list throughout my term.
Well, and we look forward to seeing you at the tops of those lists. But thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate this conversation. And thank you all for being here with us also.
Thank you.
Thanks.